Today we have Amanda Neely, who is the founder and CEO of Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. But there is so much more to this story than a finance company. We talk about her upbringing and how her mother was her inspiration. We discuss her degree and her early roles in non-profit. And importantly, she wanted to be in the community running businesses rather than just getting funding for the communities, which is absolutely a necessary role, but she wanted to have greater impact in the business and in the community. So we talk about her starting a business in a coffee shop and how she created an organic and sustainable business with sustainability at the center for all of its providers. And then we talk about when she met Mark Willis, and past guest on my podcast, which changed her life. She then went in and built the company Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, where she helps individuals, business owners, executives, whoever it is, and families to be able to build financial wealth for the future. So this is a really inspiring story that I think most people will enjoy and will really get something from. So Amanda has been a great guest, and I really value her as a guest. If you are enjoying this content, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Please do subscribe and hit the bell icon, and then you will get all the messages whenever the next post is released. And if you've got any comments, any thoughts about the podcast, who you like perhaps on my podcast, please do give me in the comments below. It really is appreciated. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Over to me interviewing Amanda. Thanks. Today we have Amanda Neely, who's the founder and CEO of Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. Hello, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. So, as I asked all of my guests, the podcast is called Absolute Business Mindset. But what does a business mindset mean to you?
Yeah, the main example I have of a business mindset is when I was pre-launching my first business. I was just working in a cubicle in downtown Chicago. I'd take public transit and I'd be walking down the sidewalk with all the other people going to work at the same time. And I realized this is not for me. I am not an ant. I don't want to be following this little path along with all these other humans. I want to do something different. I want to carve my own path, find my own sidewalk, or maybe path in the woods to walk down. And that really was my key indicator that I needed to become an entrepreneur and go after business.
And what do you feel now about the people that choose corporate careers and sort of the job route, the career route? Obviously you'll meet people that are in careers and in those types of roles. What's your feel now after you've run a business for a while? How do you feel about them now?
Yeah, because using the term ants can seem pretty demeaning, but actually ants can lift. They're really strong, right? They can lift X times their body weight. They do some really good things in the world. They're a very important insect that we have. If we didn't have ants, who knows? Kind of like the honeybees, right? Who knows how our world would be? So we need those kind of people too. And I'm glad that they're there because I use their services. I buy their products. Even we're recording on Zoom. I know there's people that are working at Zoom today, and I'm really thankful that they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And had your view, so you said your view changed when you were doing the role. Had your view of a business mindset or your personal mindset changed over the years?
100%. I went in all passion, purpose, meaning this is what I have to do, sense of destiny, and very emotional in that way. And I've learned that I have to bring more of the numbers, the profit orientation, those kinds of things in. And thankfully, I've had some great mentors that have helped me find that path too, because I realized pretty quickly, if I was all passion and never making a profit, I wasn't going to last very long.
Yeah, and we'll come on to Profit First a little bit later on. It's one of my favorite books as well. So
great.
Let's definitely have a conversation about that. Excuse me. Let's go into your upbringing. So what was your upbringing like, and sort of how your school days were?
Yeah. When I was born, my parents were on public assistance, and my mom went back to college in her 30s to be able to provide for our family. That was a great example for me of, a woman taking control, making sure that she reached her full potential and became the provider. And so I grew up thinking I could do anything. Here in the United States, the most presidents have ever come from the state that I was born in, Ohio. So I thought if there's going to be a woman president, she's going to be from Ohio. More stats show that. And so I just dreamed really big. My mom instilled that in me. And I realized as I got older and older, particularly in high school, that probably wasn't going to happen, particularly from coming from poverty. Still, my parents still made less than college tuition was going to cost. I realized, the people in the power, I'm probably not going to be that unless, at least for a long time, maybe if I have a lot of success going forward. And so I really focused on pursuing education. I had a high school teacher that taught me, undergrad is where you learn how to learn, and then you can learn whatever you want. So I went to a liberal arts school, really focused on, I'm going to learn how to learn. So whatever comes my way, I'm going to know how to figure it out and make it happen. And that's really taken me very far because I never went to get a master's degree. I don't have an MBA, but I call kind of my business experience, especially that first business that I started and sold, that was my MBA program. Really, I learned a lot, and because what I put into it, I got out of it in terms of the learning there. So it's kind of been instilled in me from a young kid to dream big and then to learn all along the way.
Absolutely. And that lifelong learning, lifelong student, I think is a really powerful mindset to have, and it can take you a long way. Even if school wasn't for you, like even if necessarily school wasn't perfect for you, just to have that mindset is a really powerful way for entrepreneurs and business owners to be successful.
Yeah. And I guess along with that came this like one need to have like empathy and relatability. I grew up in a very homogenous small town, but like seeing on television in entertainment that there was this whole wide world that was very different from me. One of my main goals, I remember senior year of high school saying my main goal in college is to be able, whoever I meet, wherever I meet them, I want to be able to have a conversation about something they're passionate about. And I think that's really taken me very far too.
Oh, that's a nice idea. That's a really nice idea. So when you went and did your degree, you did it in psychology in Chicago. What made you drive towards the psychology route initially?
Yeah, so I went to liberal arts school, University of Chicago, and we didn't have to declare a major until our third year. So I got the first 2 years, I focused on the liberal arts curriculum, all the different things. And during my second year, I wrote out all the possible majors and put a piece of paper up on my wall. And slowly I started, I took a biology course. I realized sciences aren't for me. I crossed off all the science majors and I whittled it down to like 5, and they were all in the social sciences. And I chose psychology because of the fewest requirements, and I could really take whatever I wanted. So I ended up minoring in music a little bit too, and took a whole bunch of different kinds of social science courses. One thing I loved about my college was that they would allow undergrads to take graduate level courses to count toward their graduate. So I was in the same room with people that were pursuing their master's in psychology. Or I took one class with the divinity school with a whole bunch of people that were pursuing their MDiv. And it was really well-rounded and I loved it. And then I realized like, yeah, this is that idea I had last year of high school of being able to talk to anybody and that about what they're passionate about, and that kind of empathy and expanding my horizons, loving culture. That's probably what drew me straight to psychology.
Yeah, and if you think about your experience after university, so you worked at the American Heart Association in an admin role, and then you worked in a Daystar Center, the community arts and culture. There's definitely a non-profit angle for a lot of the stuff that you've, especially the early stuff that you've done. What drove you to that?
Yeah, I've always been a kind of activist at heart. I forced my parents to recycle when I was in junior high. I've always wanted to make the world a better place, save the rainforest, save the whales. I, grew up in that mentality. And so when I left college, I I'd already worked for some nonprofits during college part-time. And I thought, this is how we change the world in the nonprofit sector. So I loved my time at the Heart Association. I had amazing bosses, managers that were poured into me. It was really great. If people are looking for a great corporate track, I highly recommend American Heart Association. It's a nonprofit. There's a really awesome way that they work there. And it was good. I felt like I was changing what I raised. I was an assistant to the grant writer, and then I became a grant writer. And personally, I wrote grants that raised $300,000 toward work in Chicago, as well as funding research around the United States to combat heart disease and strokes. And I felt really fulfilled. It was great until I went to my first site visit. I was taking the funders of the grant to the site in a lower income neighborhood in Chicago to show them, here's the programming that you helped us do. And I realized at that point that I wanted to be in the community doing the programming, not getting the money from the resourced people and telling the unresourced people what to do. And that is what ultimately led me to leave the Heart Association and really strike out on my own. We were starting our own business, and in the same building was the Daystar Center. I started volunteering with them, knowing the more people come to yoga classes or come to do music lessons, so those kind of things, the more they're going to buy coffee. Our business is a coffee shop. And then over time, I ended up becoming their director of operations because I had that business mindset to bring to the table. And it was really fulfilling, really great work. Lots of kids learned how to play piano, and who knows how that's going to help them with math and all kinds of problem solving over time. But the main thing that I loved about my role there was this was a community that was pretty new. 2007, it was the fastest growing neighborhood in the United States that we were located in. And so there weren't these places for people to gather and institutions to build the community. It's kind of like people live next to each other, but no one knew each other. And that's really what we were. And that bringing people together, having them interact with each other, I realized like building community is really, it's not just about in one-to-one having a conversation, but about facilitating conversations amongst groups of people from different backgrounds. That's how change really happens. And so that's what we really tried to foster there. And it was really awesome. I'm really fulfilled by that work. I think there needs to be more of that happening. I applaud people that do that. Part of what we're doing here, we're having a conversation, but there's a whole other group of people listening to this, and hopefully they'll reach out to us and they'll talk to us, and we can build community all over the world. And it kind of started in that little small coffee shop lobby.
Yeah, we'll talk about your business, the Overflow Coffee Bar. I just want to touch on something. So the notes that you shared with me, you talk about being, you describe yourself as a millennial.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think as a millennial you have a different view on previous generations on business, on not-for-profit community, the ecology, the environment? Do you think you have a distinctly different view as a millennial?
I think there has been this, they call it like kind of waves of business. You had with the Industrial Revolution, you had the commoditization wave, where you could actually make products available to everybody. If using coffee as an example, you could have coffee widespread everywhere and might not be good, but it was least available. And then you had the next wave, Folgers, that kind of put it, or no, actually that's the first wave is like Folgers in a can. Everybody could use it. Second wave was kind of like the Star Schmucks, who took the coffee and tried to make it good and still widely available. Then you had the third wave, which was thinking about not just good, but unique, handcrafted artisan coffee. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I think there's some really great, we would never had third wave if we hadn't had the first two. Mm-hmm. But then there's also this kind of newer wave that's saying, well, let's not just have good coffee. Let's have sustainably sourced coffee that's doing good for the coffee farmers and for the planet. And that's where we kind of fit in. We used a small micro roaster, made sure it was artisan, handcrafted, but it was also well researched and made sure the farmer was paid well for his work, as well as, cutting out the middlemen that often took that profits that didn't end up with the farmer. And then you could do that with the blueberries and the blueberry muffins and the butter and the milk and, all the things that we would use. We would try to look at the sourcing there. And I think that's not something that just millennials are doing. But like I said earlier, I grew up watching Save the Whale documentaries, and we would buy a chunk of the rainforest in elementary school as a class. That mentality has been baked into us. And I think we're driving some of businesses need to think about that triple bottom line that they call it, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's just us that's doing it. I know plenty of boomers and Xers that are, in that same vein, and plenty of younger folks that are doing even more than us millennials would.
Really interesting. Yeah. So you worked in, you were co-owner of Overflow Coffee Bar. So what was this? Where was it? How many, did you just have one store? Did you have multiple stores?
Yeah, we just had one store. It was on State Street in Chicago. If you're familiar with the city, it was kind of close to Museum Campus, a mile from Soldier Field, where the Chicago Bears play, right in the midst of Columbia College, which is an art school there, as well as a bunch of other universities. And we had a lot of fun with it. We were kind of naive, didn't know any better in terms of that we could actually start it. We started with zero assets. We actually were in debt. We still owed our student loans. My husband and I were the co-founders.
Okay.
And we figured out how to make it happen. And it was quite a journey. I can go into more of what we learned along the way. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Yeah, no, please tell us what you actually learned from. Well, the interesting thing is you started a business. What made you, what was the driving force of starting the business, and maybe some of the lessons that you learned through the journey?
Yeah. So my husband was the first one to come up with the idea of starting a coffee shop. And at first I was like, no, we're never going to do that. We're fine in what we're doing. And then I had that site visit I told you about earlier, where I realized I wanted to be in the communities. And that's when I started learning about how small businesses, mom and pop shops in neighborhoods were really providing jobs, the ones that would support the school fundraisers, the ones that were doing the work in communities. But then also businesses could look at their sourcing and really change lives around the world by their sourcing. And so that started to make me realize, hey, maybe I could also change the world through business, not just through nonprofit work, and learned from so many that have come before about what that means. Didn't know those words, social entrepreneurship, at the time. And actually after we opened, people were like, I think you're a social enterprise. And we're like, oh yeah, we are. And it was quite a journey. The big thing so this was 2008. The recession was in full force. Early 2000, when we wrote our business plan, we're really dreaming about this. 2009, the nonprofit announced layoffs, and I knew I was probably going to be leaving soon, and just had this huge sense of guilt. Like, what if they fire someone or lay someone off that has kids to feed and all this, and then I leave a couple months from now? I don't want that to happen. And I was 25 at the time. I raised my mouth to one of my managers and let him know, hey, I'm having these feelings. And they're like, well, since you spoke up, we can't lay you off, so you can't get any of the workers' comp benefits or unemployment benefits, anything like that. But we can keep you on for a couple more months, have you train a replacement, and then you can move on. And that would save someone's role. And so made that plan. So then I had a couple months to figure it out. I found another mom and pop coffee shop in another neighborhood in the city. And we sat down with them over dinner and said, hey, can I work for you for free? And you just teach me everything you know. Because I had never worked in a restaurant, never worked with coffee, didn't know anything. We just loved the, coffee. We loved the idea. And so June 30th was my last day at the nonprofit. July 1st, I started the internship. We called it an internship at the coffee shop, working for them for free for 3 months, updated their pricing, learned how to make lattes, whatever they needed to do, I did. And that was really my, learning experience there. Continued to then work for them as a barista just to make a little bit of money while we were getting started, because Ruth, the owner there, handed me a book about how to start a coffee shop that she had read, that she thought would be good for me to read. And when I read it's going to cost $250,000 on average to start, I was like, where are we ever going to get this? Remember, we still had student debt. We had no assets. We didn't own a home, nothing. And so, but we went to work, we figured it out. We did some bootstrapping. I would take a suitcase empty on the L train, the public transit, and fill it up with coffee bags and bring it back and deliver it to homes in the neighborhood that we were going to be starting in, and, figured out how to get some business going right away, kind of that bootstrapping part. We did events with other businesses. Like there was a wine shop that we did a wine pairing and a coffee pairing there, and that was fun. It also, brought her more business. She sold a bunch of bottles of wine, and we got to spread. It was kind of marketing and getting the money together. But ultimately, we're people of faith. We were reflecting one day on the story of how the Israelites go across the Jordan into the promised land. And they're told, you don't have to take over the whole land at once, right? You take over it like a little bit by little bit. And that really inspired us. Like, as starting a business, we don't have to build it all at once. You build it little bit by little bit. And so we were open to partnering with other people. Maybe there was a space that we could be a part of, but we could partner with others. So we didn't have to remodel and pay for this whole big space that we weren't big enough to fill yet. And that actually led us to find Daystar. It was a pre-K through 8th grade private school. And then they used about 2/3 of their building for the school. And the other third, they had this dream to make it a community center. And we could be in the lobby of that community center. And by partnering with them, we brought the cost down from $250,000 down to $100,000. Very super a big deal that we got that have that partnership and we're able to make it happen, because they were going to replace the floors anyway. They were going to redo so many things. We just had to pay for the upgrades to make it into a coffee shop and then put in our own equipment and everything. So that was kind of the big things for us, were learning first, and then also being willing to do things a little differently in terms of partnerships, because we needed to figure out how to make this work financially, or else we were never going to get started. And in the midst of that, we built a lot of community. We had what we called a setup shop committee, where we just got a bunch of friends together and we'd buy pizza, and all of them would like our Facebook page and share with all their friends, and different things like that would help build the marketing even from the beginning there too, which then when we opened, we had customers already ready to come.
And as growing that business from bootstrapping it to a little bit of free marketing and sort of you partnering, which I think is a great idea. A lot of smaller businesses should think about partnering with other people to make it easier for both parties. Did you stay in the Daystar Community Center there, or was that where your store was?
Yes, it was. Yep.
And you built that, because I'm assuming you didn't just build a business, you built a community as well, and built people, bringing people in there. How did you build the community in parallel with the business?
Yeah, it was really just how we did business. I in our very first business plan in 2008, you get to the section where it's how are you different than your competitors? Because we had a Starbucks close by, there was a Dunkin' Donuts close by. I wrote there that the way we were going to be different was to be authentic and true to our community, and to be, to really actually care about people, to have real conversations, not just be, any place, anywhere. And so we built it with the community in mind. And we also built it in such a way that you could have a conversation with the person making your latte, like the way that we set it up. If you ordered a sandwich and someone was making your sandwich, you could talk to them while they're making your sandwich. And, not too high of, walls, right? Keeping the walls low, things like that. And that made a big difference over time. We started to notice people would come in to buy coffee just to have a conversation. They didn't really want the coffee. They wanted to have a conversation. And that's when we knew we had succeeded at building the community. It was also, having a partner that could roast the coffee for us.
Right.
That way we didn't have to be bogged down in the back room, with a roaster. We could be having conversations with people and focusing on that side of our business. And of course, treating our staff really well too, so that they were excited to talk to people. And how we hired made a big difference too. I loved our staff, and our customers loved them too. We made sure we hired people that weren't going to just stand there and make lattes, but we're going to have conversations as well.
Amazing. So you do your MBA in running your business, and you've got a successful business. You built a community, which is amazing. You get to the point where you want to sell the business. So what was your experience? As I say, I've said this to you before, this is my favorite bit. And the first sale of any business is such a fascinating journey experience for someone to go through. So what was it like for you, Amanda?
Yeah, so I've got to back up a couple years before and talk about how we thought we had built this great business. We thought we had this great community, and we sat down with one of our mentors who is also an attorney, very sharp, amazing guy. His name is Mark, actually, as well. And he said to us, yeah, but are you profitable? And that sent us on the trajectory of like, well, actually, we're still eating ramen and barely paying ourselves. Let's make sure we're profitable. And we started taking steps in that direction. And that also kind of broke up a little bit of that passion. We were so into it. Didn't matter if we were eating ramen, we were making the world a better place. And we started to realize that it would be a lot harder to change the world long-term from the edge of poverty ourselves, right? How do you end poverty from the edge of poverty? What if we got a few steps away from that edge? We'd probably do a much better job. And so we started on that. And not only did that shift our money, but it started to shift our mindset too. Instead of paying ourselves at the end of the month, we were paying ourselves at the beginning of the month. We were making sure this business works not just for the people that we were serving, but also for us. And we thought we loved it. We were still doing really great. And then I found out that I was pregnant. And that's when we realized, hey, this isn't going to work for us with a little one, right? It works for Brandon, my husband, and Amanda, me, right? But is it going to work for us when we add a third person into the role? I realized the way we were living, the hours we were working, we couldn't like sling a baby on and make lattes, stuff like that. And so we started exploring options. What are we going to do? And one of those, so this community center also had other nonprofits that officed there. They had offices. And one of those offices was an entrepreneurship training program. And he had asked us a little bit over time if we would ever sell. Every year or so, he would ask us, would you ever sell? And we'd always say, no, we love this. And we went back to him, we said, were you being serious about us selling? And he was like, yeah, I was being 100% serious. And we started having conversations. We ended up selling the business to that nonprofit to continue to do the work we are doing in terms of the sourcing and the building the community, but also to train future entrepreneurs, right? They switched and went with a different baker that was a startup baker, and it's going to be incubating her business then, all those kind of things. So they're continuing the mission and building on top of it. But it was really that inkling, like we have to do what's best for us, that ultimately led us to sell the business, because we realized it wasn't going to be best for us as our family grew.
Very interesting. And it still exists? It's still going, is it, in the coffee shop?
Yeah, the funny thing is so the school was doing amazing, was expanding. They needed to take over the whole building. So the lease that the coffee shop had ended up ending on our son's first birthday. And can you imagine if we had kept the coffee shop, if, restarting from in a totally different location with a 1-year-old at the same time. And so thankfully, actually that nonprofit, they've been around for 20 years or more at that point. They had some big funders. They were able to go buy a building on Michigan Avenue, just a couple of blocks away. And they now have this entrepreneurship incubation program. They have a co-working space and the coffee shop kind of on multiple levels of this building that they bought. We recently were back in Chicago and visited them. They've done an amazing job building on top of the brand that we built and propelling it to the next level.
Amazing. That's absolutely fascinating. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit to current day. So Grandma's Wealth Wisdom is your current business.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell me what that is, what you do, who you help?
Yes. So this is really rooted in our story. If you go back 2 years into our business was when we realized we were really on the edge of poverty, slightest misstep, and we'd end up in bankruptcy. And we actually, a previous guest on your show, Mark Willis, we met him at that time, and he taught us about money in a totally different way than we'd ever thought about it before, and introduced us to this concept called bank on yourself. Yeah. And it totally revolutionized our lives, walked us away from the edge personally. But there was still the question of the business too, right? The business could wreck our personal, right? A lot of businesses close because the entrepreneur runs out of money personally, and the business isn't fueling that. So we made sure we shored up our personal finances so that we wouldn't run out of money. But there was still the question of, would the business still then be able to keep generating and running the same? And then, so a year later, it was when we heard about Profit First, and we started taking that journey. For those that aren't familiar, Profit First is a book written by Mike Michalowicz. It's a cash flow management system where instead of, it goes revenue minus profit equals expenses.
So I have it here.
Yeah.
If anyone is looking on the YouTube, I have in front of me Profit First with from my knowledge. Okay, yes, please tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we started that journey of we'd take our revenue, we'd take our profit first, and then we'd figure out how to run the business on the rest. Our staff had a lot of fun with it in terms of, how do you sell an extra pastry per shift, or how do you measure your milk a little more appropriately so we waste less, in terms of like making sure the business operations worked. And so when we were selling the business, we were thinking like, well, what's meant a lot to us in terms of our next business? What has changed our lives, and how could we share that with others? And we thought about the work we did with Mark and the bank on yourself policies that we had, and how if we didn't have them, we would have never been able to sell the business, because we had a flood in the business just a few months prior to selling, and we would have had to close if we didn't have the personal funds to help the business get through that experience. Yeah. And then we thought about Profit First, that we wouldn't have a profitable business to sell if it hadn't have been for Profit First. The nonprofit wouldn't know that they could pay a manager, that the same amount that we had been paying ourselves. And so we decided, hey, we're going to share these with the world. We're going to make sure more people hear about them, because the biggest thing we hear from others is, I've never heard about this. Why haven't I heard about this before? And so we went through the Bank on Yourself professional program. We took on Mark Willis as our mentor. He taught us a lot. He took us through like an additional program that was very rigorous, and we learned a lot from him. And then we started sharing Bank on Yourself with folks. And then when the pandemic hit, we realized we've been working with a lot of business owners, but business owners need Profit First and an ally to help them figure out their cash flow in their business now more than ever. Yeah. So at that point was when we became Profit First professionals too. We'd been talking about Profit First all the time, but we were like, we need more tools to do this and to help people, business owners, more fully adopt Profit First, rather than just telling them to read the book or sharing our own experience with it. So we're now, we've got a podcast. It's called Wealth Wisdom Financial Podcast. One of the things I love about Bank on Yourself and Profit First is that they both are rooted in things that folks have learned over hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not something that was invented in the 1980s, right? It's this, wealth wisdom type philosophies that undergird their systems and the programs that they are. And so that's why we named our podcast Wealth Wisdom Financial Podcast. And also, like Grandma, a lot of us think of her as our own grandma, but when we look back at the greatest generation, we talked about boomers and Xers before, we look back at the greatest generation, there were some of the most entrepreneurial folks out there. They had to get through the Great Depression.
Yeah.
They were fighting in World War II. Like they made the world we live in today through their own ingenuity and willingness to put in the effort to make big things happen. And so, and they did money. They built their wealth very differently than our parents, the boomers, did.
Mm.
And so we want to kind of get back and bring out some of those philosophies that they had and talk about how do we apply those to today when we live in a much more similar financial landscape.
Yeah, with my business partner, his mother-in-law is ill, but she's like 89, 90, something like that. And we were just talking about how determined she is just to keep going. And there's some complications there. And I just said to him, and thinking about my grandfather who passed away a couple of years ago, they just don't make them like that these days, do they? That type of personality, the way they conducted themselves, the way they did things, the way they run the families and run the communities and things like that. We don't make them like that these days, do we?
Right. That was, so my dad was born in 1928, and he was one of those guys too. He's who I think about when I think about grandma's wealth wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you sent over some details about you and what you do, but I thought it was very interesting. You were saying that you help put financial strategies for individuals, families, and business owners. And I thought it was very interesting that the community field that you've got is still running through your new business as well.
Absolutely. And we try the best that we can, not just to be working one-on-one with people. We work with couples. Obviously, we try to talk about generational wealth and how do we make sure that we're doing family planning, family financial planning. And then also with business owners, it's not just talking about their business, it's also talking about them personally, how it impacts their families, how it impacts their employees, but then also bringing people together, these individuals over here and these individuals over here, connecting them, not just with us, but with each other, to know that they're not alone, that they're not, the weird person of their friends group doing this weird financial strategy that no one else seems to be doing, that there are plenty of other people doing it as well.
And I'm making a big assumption here, and maybe I shouldn't. I'm just thinking, so I know what Profit First is. I've read the book. You obviously are a practitioner. Could you just give us sort of 30-second sort of high level people that haven't read the book?
Yeah. So the main principle behind it is, if you look at the generally accepted accounting practices, you pull up a profit and loss statement, for example, you're going to see revenue, expenses, and then profit at the bottom. And congratulations, you're profitable. It becomes like an event at the end of the year, kind of thing. What Profit First does is it invites us to flip the script and take our revenue and take our profit first from that. And then whatever is left become our expenses. We learn to run our business off those operating expenses. And that transforms profit from this event into a habit, something you're doing twice a month, or maybe even more often. Every time you get paid, you take your profit first, and it becomes very similar with how in the personal finance, you're told to save first, becomes like that for your business.
And how do you help them? What sort of strategies do you implement to get people up and running?
Yeah, there's actually a really great 12-step program, kind of almost like we're helping addicts who are, addicted to, let me, build this business. I'm going to take my profit later. Eventually I'll get paid, to start transforming that. And it starts step one is you just start your first 1%. If you're running your business off of $100,000, you're not going to miss $100. If you're running your business off of $1,000, you're not going to miss $10, right? Like moving that 1%, starting that slight shift with profit is the first thing we have people do. And then we start building on top of that until they have this full, beautiful cash flow system that they know exactly what every dollar is doing. They've got predictability in their business. They know that they're going to be able to buy groceries next week, build the business that's going to bring them life, and kind of take that profit and bring it into furthering their passion even more.
I suppose something that's interesting me is, so what's the difference and or similarities between doing this profit first for a family versus a business owner?
Yeah, let me make sure I'm understanding your question. So would we use profit first on the personal side of finances?
Sure. I understand that you do that and you help families and
Yeah.
couples to sort of, and they might not be business owners, they might be business owners, and how they input. But how do you compare and contrast an entity which is your family, which might be a traditional two adults, two children, versus a family, a business with perhaps 5-10 employees or something like that?
Gotcha. Yeah. So one thing I love about Profit First is he stole a lot of personal finance philosophies and translated them to business. So it's really easy to do the reverse. And I'll give you an example. We learned from someone that back the greatest generation, they were taught this 10-10-10 savings formula. We've dubbed it grandma's 10-10-10 savings formula. So it's not just save first. You then can build up to 10% for long-term savings, like retirement, that kind of thing. 10% for medium term, like a roof repair, a new car, something that's, kids' college, something like that. And 10% for short term, things that happen once a year or every quarter, like an oil change or the holidays, birthdays, family vacation. And most people, kind of how the Profit First system, it has these target allocation percentages. Here's where you want to get to, but you start with the 1%. Most people see that 30%, the 10-10-10, as a target. And we start with the 1% and we make the slight adjustments to get there, to build that foundational wealth that can take their family from generation to generation to generation.
Fantastic. Where do you see yourself in the next 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, I'm actually in a really exciting time. I've finished all my requirements to become a certified financial planner, and I'm planning to take the board exam in November. And I know that I've learned all this stuff now, kind of set my own foundations, been working on the underground part of the business. And once I have those designations, I know I'm going to publish a book and have those 3 little letters after my name. And we're going to start hiring sub agents or associates to work under us, to start mentoring and training them, really take this little financial firm we've built with my husband and I and 2 full-time staff into a full service financial firm with who knows how many staff we'll end up with, and what kind of business will grow. But it'll be the kind of thing that will carry us into our older years, but also continue to spread the life-changing and business-changing message of bank on yourself and Profit First and grandma. And
your business, you just said that is run with your business, with your partner as well?
Yes. Yep.
And what's it like working day to day with your partner?
It's interesting. We're definitely very different people. I'm more in the book smart and he is way better on the people smart. I'm actually a little socially awkward if you haven't figured that out yet. And so we both bring those to the table, but also they sometimes conflict with each other. And we've been married for 16 years now. So we figured out how to have little fights and find compromise, or say, well, let's decide in a week or 2 after our emotions have simmered down. We figure out our own way to kind of have those strategies that way to work well in business, but also in terms of families, hopefully we'll be able to pass it on, and it's a family business, keep it in the family to be part of that generational wealth that we like to think about.
That'd be amazing. I'm coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what was the best decision that you made?
take the leap and go on this entrepreneurial journey.
What was the best piece of advice you were given?
And you can't do it alone. Don't do anything alone. Always do things with other people, even if it's you're driving and you've got somebody in the passenger seat.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think a lot of people start their businesses and sometimes they do it on their own, and they think, oh, well, I've got to do it all. It's a tech company or something. I've got to develop everything. I've got to build relationships. But actually, and something I've found, I have started two businesses, and having business partners is actually a really rewarding way of being able to sort of give you support on when you need it most. And sometimes it might just be a simple 5-minute conversation. It might be an in-depth analysis of where your business strategy is going, whatever it is required. But it is more fun doing it with someone else, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there are plenty of young professionals who want to build their resumes that there's something at work that's not building their resume in the way they want to. And they would totally jump in and help and make things happen within businesses as a way to build that skill and learn something new, be part of something bigger.
And just on that, just on the employee side, so you said you got 2 full-time employees. How did you recruit them? Who are they? Are they financial advisors as well, or are they?
Yeah, they're just administrative support staff. And we have worked in the past with like virtual assistant companies. We've worked with HR recruiting folks, but we found that we do really well. We've developed our own system of just putting it out on the job posting websites and fielding people. And that's how we found both of them. One thing I love is hiring recent college graduates. So our second staff person we just hired a month ago, and she had just graduated from college in May. And I told her, look forward to spoiling you for the rest of your career, that you're going to know what it's like to work at a great company for an amazing manager.
Oh, amazing. Who helped you most in your career?
My husband, for sure. And there's, like you were talking about with having a partner, there were so many times I wanted to just throw in the towel and give up. And he reminded me why we're doing this and what's important about it, and helped me find the path forward.
Amazing. Do you have any regrets?
Not really. I think you learn from every moment, every mistake you make, there's a learning experience to it. There's probably some things I wish could have happened differently. Maybe sometimes when I've opened my mouth too quickly and didn't think things through. That's probably the biggest regrets.
And how did that sort of impact your business? Was it talking to your partner, or talking to an employee or a client? I don't want to delve into an example. I'm just thinking, like, from that reflection point, like, what could I have done slightly differently, which would have not made this situation or that situation? What have you learned? Let's put it differently. What have you learned from those types of experiences?
Yeah. What I realized is that, so there's one particular individual that we hired that was amazing, a barista, amazing man. But his personality just rubbed me the wrong way. We communicated very differently. And so sometimes how I would communicate would not be loving toward him, right? I wouldn't communicate in a way that he would feel loved. And I think the reason is because I was in a hurry. I was trying to make this business work. I was going after, how do we make this happen? How do we increase our revenue? Playing that game, that I didn't take the time to reflect on how could I love this person better with my words, and how I respect them and honor them and their own personality. And I've done a lot. Like, one of the things I love about getting straight with money, making things more profitable, having that cash flow, is it allows me to slow down and really think through, have that empathy for where someone else is coming from. Is part of why I like having this activist background, working now in business, chasing after dollars, right? Talking about profit first, talking about financial strategies. It seems like, how does that change the world? How is it making any difference? I know it's allowing people to be more generous, right? The more you have, the more you can give. but it also just gives people this lifestyle where they can fulfill who they're meant to be and have way more empathy for other folks. And that's gonna, who knows whose life that's gonna change, or how many shootings that could end, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so important. Thank you for sharing that. What are you most proud of?
Actually, now as a mom and CEO of a business, so growing, I'm really proud that I get to be my full self and, show myself that I have the capacity, or not, and like that this is me being me. I love moms that can just, stay home, pour into their kids. That's not me. That I have this permission to be me, and I've given myself that permission. I'm really proud of that.
And what does legacy mean to you?
It means that my son does way better than I do, that the next generation, they make a fifth wave that, builds on top of what we've done and makes the world a better place, has really quality stuff, and whatever the next thing they add to it is, that we give them a leg up and help inspire them to do amazing things too.
The last question is, where can people find you? But before we get to that, so coffee for you now you've been a barista, now you've owned your own company. What does coffee mean to you? Like, do you have artisan coffee beans that you make, that you use? What does coffee mean to you now?
Yeah, we buy locally roasted. We live in Cincinnati now, and we've got our 3 different roasters that we rotate between, and love their beans to use at home, or if we want to go have a latte, we know exactly where to find it. But it's really like I remember the last time I was in a chain coffee shop, and it was 2012, and it was only because I was driving overnight and couldn't stay awake and I needed something. And my son now will only know the green mermaid as Star Schmuck. He won't know how to pronounce it. It's my hope.
Okay, and lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, we're at grandmaswealthwisdom.com, or wherever you're listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube. Just look up Wealth Wisdom Financial and you'll find us.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today. Just really an inspiring story that an activist start can move into business and have a successful and sustainable and community-driven business. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Cheers.